Hey there, welcome to episode 2 of the Rocky Ruiz Show, our political commentary show where we talk about, today at least, we're going to talk about impeachment, all the stuff that's going on, so let's get right to it. All right, so we're going to start off with the whistleblower complaint. So whistleblower complaint gets submitted, and the accusation is to the President of the United States, claiming, the alleged complaint is that President Trump solicited the new president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, to a quid pro quo. At this point, Trump feels very confident about the call. So he basically releases the transcripts. And by this, I mean that he declassified it. Okay? Now, a few days later, he declassified the whistleblower complaint, the report. Right? Now, a few things that we need to know first, okay, is that according to the Whistleblower Protection Act, is that it pertains to the intelligence community. And we're not really quite sure if that includes the executive branch. Now, it's debatable, right? And I'll show you some clips of it, whether or not the president is considered the intelligence community or if that is separate to executive privilege, right? Because he's a president, it's a White House. Okay, one of the things that we need to recognize is UC, right, which is urgent concern. Once this is a legal term that's on the report to basically acknowledge that it needs to be sent to Congress within 7 days. It's such an important situation, it needs to be sent, okay? Now, the Whistleblower Protection Act was kind of made for people to go through, make reports to their chain of command instead of leaking information such as Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning did. Okay, so we're going to go by the first hearing. But before we go into the clips of what people actually said, okay, if you guys want to support this channel, please consider donating to any of these forms. So as you can see, we got Zelle, we got PayPal, we got Venmo. And obviously what we want to do is to do this either daily or just full time. It takes a lot to go through all the hearings. The hearings are about 4 to 6 hour long. I mean, the last Judiciary Committee one, well, at least not the last one, the one before that was about 9 hours. I believe this last one was 10. I mean, so they're very, very long, and it takes a lot of work to put these together. So please consider doing that. However, if you don't got the means or you don't feel like doing that, but yet you still like our content, please consider sharing this content so that we can get more people coming in and the channel grows and grows and grows. With that being said, let's go down to the beginning of the hearing. Okay. So first off, okay, now my understanding is that Joseph McGuire, who is the acting DNI, Director of National Intelligence, was the first person to be in the hearings. Now they're saying that the first one was actually the whistleblower. That may or may not be true. I'm not really quite sure. But what strikes me kind of odd is that Joseph McGuire was the first one, at least that was open, right? So it was initially open. Now, one of the barriers that he came across was that he wasn't sure if, because the whistleblower complaint was made against the president, if it was protected under executive privilege. So by doing so, he had to basically get more information, get more advice, right? Before he gets himself in trouble. So, at this point, Schiff is trying to determine whether it's credible. Well, we all know that that Michael Atkinson, the IG, the Inspector General, when he submitted the report, he claimed that it was credible, okay? And he said it was of urgent concern. Okay, so now keep in mind that saying that the report is credible doesn't necessarily mean that Trump is guilty. Okay, that just means that the contents of the report are accurate. Okay, that they did have some kind of connection with the report, meaning that it did connect with the transcript. So now, again, what we're talking about here is the call between Trump and Zelensky. So let's go through the initial clip here. Let's put on clip number 1.
You would concur, would you not, Director, that this complaint alleging serious wrongdoing by the president was credible?
It's not for me to judge, sir.
It is for you to judge, apparently. I mean, I agree it's not for you to judge. You shall provide it to Congress. But indeed, you did judge whether this complaint should be provided to Congress.
My-
Can we at least agree that the Inspector General made a sound conclusion that this whistleblower complaint was credible?
That is correct. That is in the cover letter that's been provided to the committee. I believe that's also made public, the decision and the recommendation by the Inspector General that, in fact, the allegation was credible.
Can we also agree that it was urgent that if the President of the United States was withholding military aid to an ally, even as you received the complaint, and was doing so for a nefarious reason, that is, to exercise leverage over the President of Ukraine to dig up manufactured dirt on his opponent, can we agree that it was urgent while that aid was being withheld?
There are two things.
I'm talking about the common understanding of what urgent means, because Inspector General said this was urgent, not only in the statutory meaning, this was urgent as everyone understands that term. Can we agree that it was urgent?
It was urgent and important, but my job as the Director of National Intelligence was to comply with the Whistleblower Protection Act and adhere to the definition of urgent concern, which is a legal term.
Okay, so a few things to consider here. So as you can see on that clip, Adam Schiff said if the president was withholding aid to the country of Ukraine for nefarious reasons. So as you can see, when he's saying that, he's trying to frame it in the way so that if he complies with answering his question, he's basically saying that the president is guilty and they can later on use that. So Joseph Maguire, he's not falling. I don't want to say Jerry Maguire, you complete me, So Joseph Maguire, he is not falling for it. Okay, as you can see, his concern had to deal with the UC, which was the urgent concern, because he said it's a legal term. But with the urgent concern, as I said before, if it falls, that report falls under executive privilege, then that means that he has to go through the proper channels first. Okay, and he did. He was covering himself, right? Okay. Now, also in this one, of course, he's going through. Now, you're going to hear him, Adam Schiff, you're going to hear him and a few others. Actually, you would hear them constantly trying to question this man's integrity on why not submitting it right away. Okay, so because the DNI cannot waive executive privilege, okay, so he can't do that. Only the president can. Okay, so that means that once the transcript was declassified, okay, by Trump, that it's no longer protected under executive privilege. And so let's watch a clip on that. So let's go to clip 2.
And to adhere to the meaning of the term shall.
Yes, sir.
In this case, you sought a second opinion on whether shall really means shall by going to the White House.
No, sir. There were two things, as I said in my statement. One, it appeared that it also had matters of executive privilege. I am not authorized as the Director of National Intelligence to waive executive privilege.
And at any time over the last month that you held this complaint, did the White House assert executive privilege?
Mr. Chairman, I have endeavored.
I think that's a yes or no question. Did they ever assert executive privilege?
They were working through the executive privilege procedures in deciding whether or not to exert executive privilege. And
so they never exerted executive privilege. Is that the answer?
Mr. Chairman, if they did, we would not have released the letters yesterday and all the information that has been forthcoming.
Now,
okay, so a few things here, okay? So first off, he's trying to get him in a gotcha moment, okay? That's pretty much what he's trying to do. So in this particular questioning, he talks about shall. Now, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to assume here because that clip is the direct first clip that I just showed you is what's right before that. So they don't go into any more details as to what shall means. Okay, so I'm assuming that he says shall submit within 7 days. I'm assuming, okay, just bear with me here. But that's not the case. And the stuff that Joseph Maguire is saying is that I had to find out if it was under executive privilege, okay? So, and that's super important because then that would make it his fault. Okay, so let's go to now on this next clip. You're gonna see Schiff continues to tell McGuire that he should have basically. I don't know if it's breaking the law if he doesn't consult the executive branch by submitting a report withholding classified information or a phone call with the president and a foreign leader. So what he's trying to get at is that he went to the White House first, which is the subject of the whistleblower complaint. But as we've seen both in the transcript and the report that has been released, it looks like it has executive privilege. So he's trying to explain to him, hey, this I had to go through that first. And he says everything, but it really sounds like he's just trying to get him here. Let's look at clip number 3.
The first place you went was to the White House. Am I to understand that from your opening statement? It wasn't to the Department of Justice. The first place you went for a second opinion was to the White House?
I did not go for a second opinion. The question was, is the information contained here subject to executive privilege, not whether or not it met urgent concern.
And so the first place you went for advice as to whether you should provide the complaint as the statute requires to Congress was the White House.
I am not authorized, as the Director of National Intelligence, to provide executive privileged information. I think it is prudent, as a member of the executive branch, to check to ensure that, in fact, it does not.
I'm just asking about the sequencing here. Did you first go to the White House to determine whether you should provide a complaint to Congress?
No, sir, that was not the question. The question was whether or not it has executive privilege, not whether or not I should send it on to Congress.
Okay. Is the first party you went to outside of your office to seek advice, counsel, direction, the White House?
I have consulted with the White House counsel, and eventually we also consulted with the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel.
And my question is, did you go to the White House first?
I went to the Office of Legal Counsel for advice. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm asking which you went to first. Did you go to the Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel first, or did you go to the White House first?
I went to the office, my team, my office, went to the Office of Legal Counsel first to receive whether or not the matter in the letter and in the complaint might meet the executive privilege. They viewed it and said, we've determined that it appears to be executive privilege. And until executive privilege is determined and cleared, I did not have the authority to be able to send that forward to the committee. I worked with the Office of Legal Counsel for the past several weeks to get resolution on this.
All right, now in the last clip, clip number 2, I also was going to state how basically he stumped Schiff at the end of it. I don't know if you can see like a hesitation where he's starting to think, and he's like, whoa, he kind of got me there, right? But in this clip, basically what Schiff is trying to get out of him is if he went to the White House first. But what he's saying is he went to the White House, legal counsel to determine that. So what he's trying to do is basically get him in an aha moment again. But Joseph McGuire is basically saying, no, I went to the counsel, like not necessarily the president, right? And then he has to say he cannot remove executive privilege. Okay, so that's super important here. They keep going at him in this, going. So I actually cut that clip a little bit shorter, strictly for time. But he keeps basically grilling him. He's trying to basically get him as to admit that he went to the White House first, but he went to the White House legal counsel. So that's what he's trying to tell him. I went to the legal counsel, and then he went to the DOJ, the Department of Justice. So again, he's saying he's going through the channels to basically cover himself to make sure that he's not, basically exposing classified information. Okay. Now, in this clip, this is where you see Castro then questioning McGuire. Okay. So basically, Michael Atkinson, the IG, he's the Inspector General. He's the one who submitted the whistleblower complaint. And he's the one that he went to, and he determined that, yes, this is, urgent concern. This is, an important matter. And he's the one that said there's some validity to this because it does connect to the actual transcript, okay? So that's super important. And again, just because the complaint is credible doesn't necessarily mean that Trump is guilty, okay? So a lot of people are conflating those two, okay? So, and again, we also went that because the whistleblower complaint was on the president, okay? Now, this is important to add. So it does not fall under the DNI. So the DNI is made to basically appear to the people that are within his department. He can't, just say, hey, you're at fault, go up higher. So that's what he's trying to get into this section here. So check out clip number 4.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director McGuire, for your testimony today. I want to say thank you also to the whistleblower for having the courage and the bravery to come forward on behalf of the nation. Thank you to Mr. Atkinson, also the Inspector General, for his courage in coming forward to Congress. You mentioned that you believe that the whistleblower's report is credible, that the whistleblower is credible, that the whistleblower acted in good faith. You've had a chance now, as we have, and I believe the American people have, had an opportunity to review both the whistleblower complaint and the transcript that was released of the phone call between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine. You've read both documents by now, haven't you?
Yes, Congressman.
Would you say that the whistleblower's complaint is remarkably consistent with the transcript that was released?
I would say that the whistleblower's complaint is in alignment with what was released yesterday by the President.
Okay, I want to read you a quick section of both to underscore exactly how accurate and consistent this complaint is. On page 2 of the whistleblower's complaint, the whistleblower says, according to the White House officials who had direct knowledge of the call, the President pressured Mr. Zelensky to, and then there's a few bullet points. The first one says, initiate or continue an investigation into the activities of former Vice President Joseph Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Then the third bullet point, meet or speak with 2 people the President named explicitly as his personal envoys on these matters, Mr. Giuliani and Attorney General Barr, to whom the President referred multiple times in tandem. In the transcript that was released on page 4 of the first paragraph, into what looks like the third sentence, President Trump says, the former ambassador from the United States, the woman, was bad news, and the people she was dealing with in the Ukraine were bad news, so I just want to let you know that. The other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution, etc. Do you have reason to doubt what the whistleblower has brought forward?
Getting back into Michael Atkinson's determination on whether or not it was credible or urgent concern, as the DNI, it is not my place to ensure that it is credible. That is the ICIG's job as the inspector. He has determined that it is credible. My only trouble was that, in fact, it involves someone who is not in the intelligence community or in an organization under which I have authority and responsibility.
Okay, so in this clip, something very important that Castro had said in that clip, and that's what he mentions is that the whistleblower states on his report, he states, according to the people that were listening to the call, again, according to the people that were listening to the call. So that means that somebody who was listening to the call leaked out that information to him because he never heard the call firsthand. And that's important to note. It's super important to note that that did not happen. Okay, so his report is based on secondhand knowledge. And again, he wasn't there, so I don't understand why this is considered damning. I mean, I can get why. They are in alignment there, just like Joseph McGuire said. However, what's really bizarre is that he wasn't there. Okay? So it seems to me like he made a report by playing the game of telephone. You know, when you tell a person a story and then they tell the story and so forth and so on. And as it goes further down to more people, the story gets changed, right? So, I mean, this is just really, really bizarre to begin with, okay? Now, but he makes a good point. And the point is that he basically, Joseph McGuire already agreed with Castro that it's an alignment, right? And then he said, oh, it's a sole alignment. Now, after that clip, he goes on to say, you know, do you see what he was trying to do? So basically now he's alleging that Trump was attempting to solicit Zelensky by saying, you know, give me a favor. But he doesn't, Trump never says what he's going to give Zelensky. So, and that's important to note. So if you guys want to read the transcript, it's actually pretty small. I'll try to put a link in the description so you can read it yourself. But never in the call does he say, hey, if you do me this favor of investigating, you know, the Bidens or Burisma, then, you know what, we'll give you the aid. So he never says that, okay? And that's very important, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Now what happened after this hearing, okay, is that it was open, right? So that means he had the press. We were all able to see it on TV. However, after this, all the hearings were held in private, okay? And the reason I think that, again, this is speculation, okay? So I don't have any proof of it other than what we're seeing here. I'm just speculating. I don't know what happened behind the doors, right? And I think that this particular hearing went really bad for them. It went really bad because they were basically trying to get this guy to admit that it was wrong, but he's saying, hey, that's not for me to judge. For me to say is that, hey, here's a report, okay? So now after that, they decided, hey, we're going to do these hearings in private. And because the Democrats have the majority, I think Adam Schiff was involved in leaking out information on the hearing, only what was damning to the president. Okay, because you didn't hear any other type of leaks, like anything that would protect the president. And I think that was made so that not all of us can hear what they're saying. Okay, so let's go on. So in this section, you have Jim Jordan, okay, who he kind of goes ham on people. He's talking to Bill Taylor, right? And basically, he's trying to, again, establish if there's a link with the money, okay? So let's take a look at that clip. Clip number 5.
Aid's held up on July 18th, is that right?
That's when I first heard about it, Mr.
And then it's released, Ambassador Taylor, on September 11th. And we know that from your deposition, in those 55 days that aid is delayed, you met with President Zelensky 3 times. The first one was July 26th, the day after the famous call now between President Trump and President Zelensky. President Zelensky meets with you, Ambassador Volker, and Ambassador Sondland. And again, according to your deposition and your testimony, there was no linkage of security assistance dollars to investigating Burisma or the Bidens. Second meeting is August 27th. Again, in this 55-day time frame, second meeting is August 27th. President Zelensky meets with you and Ambassador Bolton and others. And again, there's no linkage of dollars, security assistance dollars, to an investigation of the Bidens. And then, of course, the third meeting is September 5th. President Zelensky meets with you and Senators Johnson and Murphy. And once again, there was no linkage of security assistance dollars to an investigation of Burisma or the Bidens. 3 meetings with the president of Ukraine, the new president, and no linkage. That's accurate?
Ms. Jordan, it's certainly accurate on the first two meetings because, to my knowledge, the Ukrainians were not aware of the hold on assistance until the 29th of August.
So the Politico article.
The third meeting that you mentioned with the senators, Senators Murphy and Senator Johnson, there was discussion of the security assistance, but
no linkage.
But there was not discussion of linkage.
3 meetings face-to-face with President Zelensky, no linkage. Yet, in your deposition, you said this, and you said it again the first hour of the majority. My clear understanding was security assistance money would not come until President Zelensky committed to pursue the investigation. My clear understanding was they weren't going to get the money until President Zelensky committed to pursue the investigations. Now, with all due respect, Ambassador, your clear understanding was obviously wrong.
Okay, so now this particular clip is very important because the one that the Democrats keep exposing is where he said it seemed really bizarre that the president would hold the aid. Nobody was really understanding it. And, I could understand his point of view is that, yeah, he's right. It would be weird, especially if it was approved by Congress. He was supposed to get the aid. Why is it being held off? That's a fair assessment. Okay. But that's the clip that they use. They don't use this clip. And in this clip, Ambassador Taylor is saying that he had no knowledge and that he basically saying that I didn't hear it firsthand. Basically, what he's saying is that he says, my clear understanding when he says that the money was tied to the investigation is all coming from Sondland. But the reason why this is important is because he states himself that there was no link to the money. And that's very important because I think that would constitute it as bribery if my understanding is correct, because obviously they didn't get a quid pro quo from the phone call, right? All right. Now, Jim Jordan gets to kind of grill him a second time. So let's look at that clip, clip number 6.
All right. So again, just to recap, you had 3 meetings with President Zelensky. No linkage in those 3 meetings came up. Ambassador Zelensky didn't announce that he was going to do any investigation of the Bidens or Burismas before the aid was released. He didn't do a tweet, didn't do anything on CNN, didn't do any of that. President Zelensky, excuse me.
Right.
And then what you have in front of you is an addendum that Mr. Sondland made to his testimony that we got a couple weeks ago. It says, Declaration of Ambassador Gordon Sondland. I, Gordon Sondland, do hereby swear and affirm as follows. I want you to look at point number 2, bullet point number 2, second sentence. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yarmak on September 1st, 2019 in connection with Vice President Pence's visit to Warsaw and a meeting with President Zelensky. Now, this is his clarification. Let me read it one more time. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yarmak on September 1st, 2019 in connection with Vice President Pence's visit to Warsaw and a meeting with President Zelensky. We got 6 people having 4 conversations in one sentence, and you just told me this is where you got your clear understanding. Which, I mean, even though you had 3 opportunities with President Zelensky for him to tell you, you know what? We're going to do these investigations to get the aid. Didn't tell you 3 different times. Never makes an announcement, never tweets about it, never does a CNN interview. Ambassador, you weren't on the call, were you? You didn't listen on President Trump's call and President Zelensky's call?
I did not.
You've never talked with Chief of Staff Mulvaney?
I never did.
You never met the president?
That's correct.
You had 3 meetings again with Zelensky and it didn't come up.
And 2 of those they had never heard about as far as I know.
And President
There was no reason for it to
President
come up.
Zelensky never made an announcement. This is what I can't believe. And you're their star witness. You're their first witness.
Mr.
You're the
Jordan,
guy. You're the guy based on this. Based on, I mean, I've seen church prayer chains that are easier to understand than this. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told, now again, this is, I hereby swear and affirm from Gordon Sondland. Ambassador Taylor recalls that Mr. Morrison told Ambassador Taylor that I told Mr. Morrison that I conveyed this message to Mr. Yarmak on September 1st, 20. This all happens, by the way. This all happens, by the way, in Warsaw, where Vice President Pence meets with President Zelensky. And guess what?
Taylor,
they didn't talk about any linkage either.
Time of the gentleman's expired.
Okay, now I kind of consider these to be huge bombshells here, okay? Because not only did he uncover that there was no linkage, okay? He also uncovered that there was 3 opportunities that he could have been told by Ukraine, hey, where's the money, right? And they never did. And at least when they did, they never said, hey, let President know that we're going to announce that investigation. So that never happened, right? And then the other thing that he established, too, is that Taylor was not on the call. Now, afterwards, Taylor goes on to say, look, let's get something straight. I don't consider myself their star witness. Now, Jim Jordan ends up saying, they do. You're the first one. So basically, he's not really the first one. The first one is Joseph McGuire. But he means after the closed hearings, he was the first one that they felt, hey, this is going to give us a damning information, okay? And, like I said, the concern is that, Joseph McGuire initially said is that his clear understanding was that the aid would not be released without the announcement of the investigation towards Burisma / the Bidens. Okay, but Jim Jordan basically established in detail that he never really knew firsthand. He never got that from the president. He never really got that from anyone else other than Sondland. Okay, and so it was kind of like a speculation. Okay, and we're gonna circle back to Sondland because if you listen to that clip, Jim Jordan says he made an addendum. So an addendum is an addition, right, to his testimony. And the reason he did that is because he actually he had made his first testimony in the closed hearings, and then he heard somebody else's testimony and was like, "Whoa, I totally forgot about that." And look, this is possible. It's possible that he probably did forget. There's a lot of people that would probably forget. Because if it was months ago, without me having notes, I'm really not going to have a clear understanding, even myself, on something that happened 4 or 5 months ago. At least not, with accurate, things, especially with a hearing like this, that as important as this one. So I believe him on that, and I do believe McGuire when he said that. He says, I don't consider myself their star. I just want to come out here and say the truth. Which I do believe him. Okay, I believe he wants to say the truth, but he just basically got caught in a situation where he was like, "Oh, I didn't even think of that it was my speculation," and that's not how he said it. So that again, it's important to note the wording. These people you're going to see a lot of these people careful in the words that they use. Okay, so in this next clip, you're going to see Jim Jordan again. I mean, he's kind of like a hard ass, man. But Jim Jordan questioning Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. And so Vindman was on the call. Okay, now this is the important thing to note, is that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was on the call. So was Mrs. Williams, and it was Morrison. So Morrison is Vindman's boss, right? So this is important. These were the three that were on the call. All right? We'll go to clip number 7.
I thank the ranking member. Colonel, I want to thank you for your service and sacrifice to our great country. This afternoon, your former boss, Mr. Morrison, is going to be sitting right where you're sitting, and he's going to testify. And I want to give you a chance. I think we're bringing you a copy. I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things Mr. Morrison said in his deposition, page 82 of the transcript from Mr. Morrison. Mr. Morrison said this: "I had concerns about Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's judgment. Among the discussions I had with Dr. Hill in the transition was our team, its strength, its weaknesses, and Fiona and others had raised concerns about Alex's judgment. When Mr. Morris was asked by Mr. Castor, did anyone ever bring concerns to you that they believe Colonel Vindman may have leaked something, Mr. Morrison replied, yes. So your boss had concerns about your judgment. Your former boss, Dr. Hill, had concerns about your judgment. Your colleagues had concerns about your judgment, and your colleagues felt that there were times when you leaked information. Any idea why they have those impressions, Colonel Vindman?
Yes, Representative Jordan. I guess I'll start by reading Dr. Hill's own words, as she attested to in my last evaluation that was dated middle of July, right before she left. Alex is a top 1% military officer and the best Army officer I have worked with in my 15 years of government service. He is brilliant, unflappable, and exercises excellent judgment.
So
It was
Okay,
It was exemplary during numerous visits, so forth and so on, but I think you get the idea. Mr. Morrison, yeah, the date of that was, let's see, I'm sorry, July 13th. So, Mr. Jordan, I would say that I can't say what why Mr. Morrison questioned my judgment. We had only recently started working together. He wasn't there very long, and we were just trying to figure out our relationship. Maybe it was a different cultures, military culture versus.
And Colonel, you never leaked information?
I never did, never would. That is preposterous that I would do that.
Okay, so right here, basically, he's saying that his own boss basically doesn't trust him, right? And he also says that about Fiona Hill. We'll show you a little bit about Fiona Hill, but I'm gonna show you guys as to why I don't think it merits much on what Fiona Hill, other than the evaluation that she did for him, because she wrote an evaluation saying that he has good judgment, but according to Morrison, he's saying that he had a conversation with her and that he has poor judgment. Okay, and is it possible? Sure. I mean, she was leaving. She basically Fiona Hill worked before that and basically transferred the ranks over to Morrison, right, who's now his boss. Okay, so that's one of the things that they're establishing there, right? And then he's also being accused of basically leaking. Okay, now this is going to become very important in a little bit. So let's go to the next clip number 8.
Okay, Colonel, it's interesting. We deposed a lot of people in the bunker in the basement of the Capitol over the last several weeks. But of all those depositions, only 3 of the individuals we deposed were actually on the now somewhat famous July 25th phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky. There was you, the individual sitting beside you, Ms. Williams, and then there, of course, was your boss, Mr. Morrison, who I just read from his deposition. When we asked Ms. Williams, who she spoke to after the call, about the call, she was willing to answer our questions, and chairmanship allowed her to answer our questions. When we asked Mr. Morrison, who he spoke to after the call about the call, he was willing to answer our question, and Chairman Schiff allowed him to answer our question. But when we asked you, you first told us 3 individuals at the NSC, your brother and the 2 lawyers. And then you said there was a group of other people you communicated with, but you would only give us 1 individual in that group, Secretary Kent. And the chairman would only allow you to give us that name. When we asked you who else you communicated with, you would not tell us. So I want to know first, how many other people are in that group of people you communicated with outside the 4 individuals I just named?
Yes, Mr. Jordan, on call readout, certainly after the first call, there were probably a half a dozen or more people that I read out. Those are people with the proper clearance and the need to know. In this case, because of the sensitivity of the call, and Mr. Eisenberg told me not to speak to anybody else, I only read out, outside of the NSC, 2 individuals.
2 individuals.
Das Kent and 1 other person.
And you're not willing to tell us who that other individual is?
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
The gentleman suspend. Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask you to enforce the rule with regard to the disclosure with regard to the intelligence officer.
Okay, so this clip is kind of funny to me, okay? Because one of the things that we establish here is that Vindman's got a big mouth, okay? So he's out there talking to other people about it, you know? And he said he spoke to 2 people, one being his brother, or I'm sorry, Mr. Kent, and so I guess the others, they had the proper clearance, right? So he had spoke to Kent, and then he had spoke to 1 more person, right? And the lawyer, right, his lawyer, he stops him from being questioned on who that is when Jim Jordan asks. And he doesn't say whistleblower, but he says in adherence to the, things on the intelligence. So he starts kind of like trying not to say the whistleblower, right? Which, even though they're saying that what he's perceiving, and this is, again, assumption, okay? Assumption. I think that Vindman's perceiving that when they said leak, that he leaked out the information to the press. And I don't think that's what they're talking about. What they're talking about is him leaking the information to the other person who is the whistleblower. Now, the reason why this is important, why he won't say that, okay, is because, he had said in his testimony that he does not know who the whistleblower is. Okay, so that's super important to note. He said that, and Adam Schiff said that. Okay, and Jim Jordan's going to go over this in the next clip. So let's do clip number 9.
Thank you, counsel. As I indicated before, this committee will not be used to out the whistleblower. That same
Mr. Chairman,
necessity
can you
of
first
protecting
stop the time so I don't lose the time?
will persist. You are recognized again, Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see how this is outing the whistleblower. The witness has testified in his deposition that he doesn't know who the whistleblower is. You have said even though no one believes you. You have said you don't know who the whistleblower is. So how is this outing the whistleblower to find out who this individual is?
Jordan, this is your time for questioning. You can use it any way you like, but your question should be addressed to the witness. And your question should not be addressed to trying to out the whistleblower.
Well, okay. Colonel Vindman, there's another thing Mr. Morrison told us in his deposition. He said he was not concerned about the call itself. He said there was nothing illegal or improper on the call, but he was concerned about the call leaking, the contents of the call leaking. He said this, he was concerned how it would play out in Washington's polarized environment, how the contents would be used in Washington's political process. Mr. Morrison was right.
Excuse me, Mr. Jordan, could I get a page?
Page 44.
Thank
Mr. Morrison was right. The call leaks. The whistleblower goes to Chairman Schiff, staff. Then he runs off to the lawyer, the same lawyer who said in January of 2017 the coup has started against President Trump. The one thing the Democrats one thing they didn't count on was the president releasing the call transcript and letting us all see what he said. They didn't count on that. Transcript shows no linkage. The two individuals on the call have both said no pressure, no pushing, no linkage, but security assistance dollars to an investigation. Ms. Williams, after the call on the 25th, we know that Colonel Vindman talked to several people. After the call on the 25th, how many people did you talk to about the call?
I did not speak to anybody about the call.
Didn't speak to anybody?
No.
I yield back.
This particular clip, I mean, this is super important because he's already, if you can hear him, he says, I think, basically Jim Jordan saying, I think you are the one who spoke to the whistleblower. Because everything that the whistleblower is saying is not firsthand knowledge, okay? This is, all secondhand, all right? Now, remember he said, according to the people that were listening to the phone call, okay? So we already established that, Miss Williams said she didn't speak to no one about the call, okay? And that his, basically Vindman's boss already suspects him of being the leak, right? Meaning that he's the one that spoke to the whistleblower. We already established that the lawyer doesn't even want to say whistleblower, and he doesn't want him to expose who that person is that he spoke to. And if it isn't the whistleblower, then how is that? And Adam Schiff said we're not going to use the questioning to out the whistleblower. But you said you don't know, and you said that he said he didn't know. Dude, these are super damning problems here, okay, that are being addressed, okay? So, I mean, look, and after this, we're going to hear... after this, I'm gonna play one more clip with Jim Jordan and Vindman because he gets to question him again because somebody yields their time to Jim Jordan, and he asks him again about a few more details. Okay, so let's watch clip number 10.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Colonel Vindman, why didn't you go after the call? Why didn't you go to Mr. Morrison?
I went immediately per the instructions from the July 10th incident. I went immediately to Mr. Eisenberg. After that, once I made that, expressed my concerns, it was an extremely busy week. We had a PCC just finish, we had the call, and then we had a deputies meeting, which consumed all of my time. I was working extremely long days. I attempted to try to communicate. I managed to speak to two folks in the interagency. I attempted to try to talk to Mr. Morrison. That didn't happen before I received instructions from John Eisenberg to not talk to anybody else any further.
So the lawyer, you not only didn't go to your boss, you said you tried, but you didn't go to your boss. You went straight to the lawyer, and the lawyer told you not to go to your boss?
No, he didn't tell me until what ended up unfolding is I had the conversation with the attorney. I did my coordination, my core function, which is coordination. I spoke to the appropriate people within the interagency, and then circling back around, Mr. Eisenberg came back to me and told me not to talk to anybody else.
I'm going to read from the transcript here. Why didn't you go to your direct report, Mr. Morrison? Your response was, this page 102, because Mr. Eisenberg had told me to take my concerns to him. Then I asked you, did Mr. Eisenberg tell you not to report, to go around Mr. Morrison? And you said, actually, he did say that. I shouldn't talk to any other people. Is that right?
Yes, but there's a period of time in there between when I spoke to him and when he circled back around. It wasn't that long a period of time, but it was enough time for me to...
Enough time to go to talk to someone that you won't tell us who it is, right?
I've been instructed not to, Representative Jordan.
Well, here's what I'm getting. The lawyer told you don't talk to any other people, and you interpret that as not talking to your boss, but you talk to your brother, you talk to the lawyers, you talk to Secretary Kent, and you talk to the one guy Adam Schiff won't let you tell us who he is. Is that right?
Representative Jordan, I did my job.
I'm not saying you didn't. All I'm saying is the instructions from the lawyer was you shouldn't talk to anybody, and you interpret that as don't talk to my boss, but I'm going to go talk to someone that we can't even ask you who that individual is.
That is incorrect.
Well, I just read what you said.
That is
I shouldn't
incorrect.
talk to any other
Time of the
people.
gentleman has expired.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chairman, but
Yes,
that
you may
sequence is not the way it played out.
I'm reading from your transcript, Colonel Vindman.
Mr. Jordan, please let Colonel Vindman answer.
There's the sequence played out where immediately afterwards I expressed my concerns. I did my coordination function. Mr. Eisenberg circled back around, told me not to talk to anybody else. In that period of time, I did not manage to talk to you.
So that's when it happened. That's when you talked to someone.
Mr. Heck?
That's right.
Okay, so again, Jim Jordan just going ham on the guy. Okay, so basically, obviously, he's establishing that all of these guys had already had hearings, private hearings, in a secured room. They call it the basement of, where Congress convenes, right? And so basically, they were not open to the public, meaning they were not on TV. The press wasn't there. These were private, and that was all per the Democrats. So, so Jim Jordan had already asked him this question, right? So when he comes and circles back again to it, okay, and he's trying to basically saying, you didn't go to your boss, which is Morrison, right? So you didn't go to your boss, but yet you went to these guys and started talking and basically, spreading this information out. Then, of course, he says something different. Okay, now it's important of what he says because again, speculation. I think that when he initially got questioned in the private hearings, he had to say he didn't want to bring up that gap. And the reason was because in that gap, he spoke to the whistleblower. Okay, and again, speculation here. Now, he didn't want to talk about that. But since Jim Jordan circled back to it in the open hearings right here, then you can see him say, oh, actually, there was a sequence there. And then he starts saying about the gap where he didn't talk to Morrison. Now, here's my concern, right? Because Morrison's his boss, and basically he should have gone through the chain of command. And anybody who's a military man knows that the chain of command is super important, right? Now, he says that he was super busy. He said he didn't have time after he went to express his concerns. Look, you could have easily made a phone call. You could have easily made a text message. But more importantly, he was with him in the room listening to the call. So why, if you were so concerned about this, why didn't you go to Morrison afterwards and say, hey, man, I got a concern about this, boss. Did you hear what he just said? But he didn't do that. Instead, he concocts his story. So I just think that there's certain things that are just convenient, so to speak, right? So this is just a little bit bizarre. Now, let's hear from his boss and hear what he says. Okay, so this is Jim Jordan again talking to Mr. Morrison. So let's put clip number 11.
Mr. Morrison, you testified in your deposition that you had issues with Colonel Vindman's judgment. Is that right?
It is, sir.
And you said specifically that you had concerns with Colonel Vindman exercising, quote, appropriate judgment as to whom he said what. Is that right?
It is, sir.
You testified that Dr. Hill, your predecessor at NSC, told you that she had concerns about Colonel Vindman's judgment. Is that right?
It is, sir.
And you testified that Colonel Vindman did not always adhere to the chain of command. Is that right?
I believe so, yes, sir.
You testified that you were aware of issues with Colonel Vindman trying to access information outside his lane. Is that correct?
Sir, I believe I stated that I was aware that there were those who were concerned about that. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. You testified that Colonel Vindman was not included on certain trips. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you testified that colleagues expressed concerns to you about Colonel Vindman leaking information. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, when I asked Colonel Vindman why he didn't go to you with his concerns about the call, even though you, his boss, had no concerns about anything being, I think your language was, nothing improper, nothing illegal on the call, I asked Colonel Vindman earlier this morning why he didn't go to you and instead went and talked to the lawyers, his brother, Secretary Kent, and one other person that he wouldn't tell us and chairmanship wouldn't allow him to tell us. When I asked him why he did that, he indicated that the lawyers had instructed him to do that and he tried to get a hold of you. Is that fair?
Sir, I watched part of the proceedings this morning. I heard him say that. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, one thing that Chairman Schiff brought up at the end of this morning's hearing, he pointed out that you, Colonel Vindman's boss, also went to the lawyers. But your reason for going to the lawyers was a little different, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you had a few things that Mr. Castor and you talked about earlier in today's hearing, but I think at the top of your list was you were concerned about the contents of the call leaking out. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what I'm the understanding that I'm getting here with this clip is that both Vindman and Morrison don't trust each other, right? You said he thought that he never adhered to the chain of command. He suspected him of leaking information. He said he had problems staying in his lane, or that some people would say that. And then that he was excluded on certain trips, probably because he didn't want certain information to get out. And so this presents a lot of concerns, right? Now, let's establish one thing, okay? Now, I think, and again, I don't know if this is necessarily true, but if you hear what he had said, is that he felt a concern that the contents of the call can be leaked, all right, means that he probably had some concern with it, but probably not in the sense where it was like, it's not enough for me to say that it's this, right, that it's bad. It just sounds really weird, and I get that. But I think he had his concerns. Well, obviously he had concerns about leaking the information, okay? But I think he had concerns over Vindman. I think that's what it was. He had concerns over Vindman because Vindman didn't bring it up to him. And, he went somewhere else. He went to, different lawyers, speak to lawyers about it. And, look, man, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing he did that, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of questionable things, especially if he's talking to people who are not on the call about the call. That's really concerning. Now, and I'm not talking about the people that he said that have the proper clearance. And I'm just talking about two people, which would be Kent and then, of course, this other mysterious person, right? Which we kind of all know what's up with that. So now then we have the statement from Stefanik, okay? I believe her first name is Elise Stefanik. And she addresses a thing that the Democrats keep saying that. Now, here's something that you're going to hear all the time from the Democrats, basically saying that the Republicans don't believe that Russians were involved or meddled in the 2016 elections, okay? So she addresses that right here because that's all they say, okay? So, and I'm going to cover a little bit more afterwards. So let's look at clip number 12.
Before I turn to our witnesses, I just wanted to say to my Democratic colleagues, not a single Republican member of this committee has said that Russia did not meddle in the 2016 elections. As the ranking member stated, we published a report focused on Russian active measures in 2016 with policy recommendations as to how we strengthen our cyber resiliency and election security to counter Russia. I myself have worked with members of this very committee on this issue, but also on the House Armed Services Committee. So to have our Democratic colleagues say these untruthful statements just reeks of political desperation in their continued obsession to manipulate mainstream media coverage. But the good news is the American people understand that this has been a partisan process from the start. The Democratic coordination with the whistleblower, the incessant and astounding leaks, the unprecedented closed-door process, closed to the majority of members, closed to the press, closed to the people, starting this inquiry without taking a vote. And then when finally forced to take a vote, the vote was with bipartisan opposition.
Okay, so one of the things that's impressive here is that Stefanik here clarifies that the Republicans they're fully aware that the Russians meddled in the 2016 election, okay? Now, I've always found this to be weird because if you're talking about making bots and buying ads, kind of bizarre. Now, if they mess with, say like ballot boxes and stuff like that, then I would be like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Now, I don't know if that's what happened. So if you know, clarify things in the comments below. But she does that to make that distinction because that's the narrative that the Democrats keep pushing. Okay, and no one's saying that. Well, I mean, I'm sure that there's some Republicans probably saying that. But the issue here is that what they believe, in accordance with the political article, is that they believe that the DNC, the Democratic committee, that they were the ones that were trying to get info from Ukraine. Not that Ukraine meddled, as opposed to meaning basically exonerating Russia. They're not saying that. They're just saying that they went to them for, that's a suspicion. That's the allegations. I don't know if it's true or not, but if it is, then, obviously you would need an investigation on that. Okay, so let that be said, because if you, right now I'm going to show you a clip with Fiona Hill and Mr. Holmes, and basically, one of the things that she says in her opening statement is that the narrative that Ukraine meddled in the elections as opposed to Russia, that it's been debunked and that it's a narrative that the Russians are pushing. But no one is saying that. Well, I mean, maybe there is, right? Maybe there's a few Republicans that are saying that, but you need to specify on who said it, okay? Because that's going to be important. So, but they're not saying that. What they're saying is that the DNC reached out to Ukraine, which that would be illegal to get information or dirt on Trump, which that is exactly what they're saying that Trump did here. Okay, so that's important to notice. Okay, so now we're gonna have here. This is gonna be pretty important here when Stefanik talks to Miss Hill here. So let's go with clip 13.
Dr. Hill, you testified that you handed over your duties on the NSC to Tim Morrison on July 15th and that you physically left the White House on July 19th, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So that means that by the time there was the July 25th call with President Trump and President Zelensky, you were no longer on the NSC, correct?
Actually, I was still technically on the payroll of the NSC until the end of August 30th of 2019. But I was not physically in the building, and I'd handed over my duties to Mr. Morrison.
And you were not on the call?
I was not on the call. That is absolutely correct.
And it's also correct that you did not participate in the preparation of talking points or the specific coordination of setting up the call?
Not for that call, but let me just say for the record that there had been a long anticipation that eventually there would be a call. So there was a call package that was prepared in advance. I just cannot say how much of that call package that had perhaps been prepared since, for example, the inauguration of President Zelensky was then used as the basic material for that call. So I did take part in the preparation of that standard call package, but I did not take part in any preparation for the specific call on July 25th.
And the first time you actually read the transcript of the call was when it was released to the public?
That's correct.
Okay, now this here is important here because so Fiona Hill goes on to say that has been debunked. Okay, so I don't know where she got the information that was debunked, and it's quite possible, right, that you had a left-leaning a publication that possibly said, hey, it was not Ukraine that meddled, it was Russia. And again, the Republicans are not contesting that. What they are saying is that they believe that the DNC had, some kind of ties with Ukraine in order to get dirt on Trump. Okay, so that's really important. And what she establishes here, what Stefanik establishes here, is that she was not there. She had already relinquished her duties off, and although she was still on the payroll, she was not there. Okay, so then this took place. By this time, Morrison was in charge. He relinquished her duty. He got her duties, and he was there. Okay, so why she's here, I'm not really quite sure. And I think in the beginning of the testimony, she said we're here as fact witnesses, right? So that's a little bit odd. Now, I don't know if they're trying to make a comparison or not. However, Holmes, who they do talk to here, he was around for that, and there was some concerns that he had. Okay, so let's actually go here with the question that she has and that Stefanik talks about. She says 3 important questions. Okay, so let's go with clip 14.
I wanted to ask both of you 3 key questions. So the fact of the matter is Ukraine ultimately did receive the aid, correct, Mr. Holmes?
Ultimately.
Yes. And Dr. Hill?
Correct, ultimately.
And there was no investigation into the Bidens, correct, Mr. Holmes?
They did not open a new investigation into the Bidens. No.
Correct. And Dr. Hill?
Correct.
And there was, in fact, a meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky ultimately at the UN. Is that correct?
The president invited Zelensky to the Oval Office at a date undetermined. That has not yet happened.
The meeting at the UN. President Trump and President Zelensky met at the UN.
They did, but not in the Oval Office.
But they did have a meeting at the UN.
They did, ma'am.
And Dr. Hill, they did? Okay, thank you. I yield back.
All right, so as you can see right here, Stefanik here establishes very clear things, okay? So that number 1, they got the aid. That number 2, that they got the meeting eventually. Now, one of the things that Holmes kind of says here is that he says, not at the Oval Office. Yeah, but they did meet, right? And they're like, yes. And that the aid was released. And then he says, ultimately, yes, but it got released. So he's trying to kind of establish, and even Fiona Hill says, yes, ultimately. Okay, so that was, for me, that was pretty funny. Now, one of the concerns that Holmes had, I had a clip for this, but I took it out for time. But Holmes says that when he spoke to Sondland, which is going to be the next clip, okay, when he spoke to Sondland, that he basically overheard a conversation on the phone, and that apparently Sondland kind of had it like this, and they were in a public, public restaurant, and a lot of stuff was going on, and they said that he can hear it. Now, I can't attest to that. I have hearing loss on my right ear, so I tend to use my phone on my left ear, and sometimes I have it pretty loud, so I can understand if some people hear it. But on a crowded restaurants, I don't know. CNN also released something where they were trying to basically kind of try to mimic that, and it kind of failed really bad. But regardless of that, basically Holmes asked Sondland, hey, what's going on with this? Like he said, and Sondland had told him that President Trump does not care about Ukraine. Well, he said like doesn't give a fuck, And so he says he only cares about big stuff. And that Holmes says, well, there is big stuff going on right here. Like the Russians invading. They're going through war right now. That's big stuff. And that Sondland said no, I mean big stuff that's going to benefit the president, like this investigation to the Bidens. And so he did express that that's what he told him on his personal time. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? I'm going to circle back to this a little bit later. Okay, so now the clip that we have here is a Sondland. So Sondland has an interesting thing because he did make an addendum to his testimony initially. And to be quite honest with you, when, because I watch both Fox and CNN to kind of get like two sides of the spectrum, And when I saw it on CNN and they were saying, hey, Sondland wants to make an addendum to his testimony, saying that I forgot things. So a lot of people were saying, yeah, he doesn't want to perjure himself. And I thought, whoa, so if he makes an addendum, this could be the damning evidence on Trump. If that's the case, because if he's trying to basically cover himself, I could kind of see that. This might be the nail on the coffin. That's what I thought. This might be the nail on the coffin. But then I saw this clip. So let's go to clip number 15.
After you testified, Chairman Schiff ran out and gave a press conference and said he gets to impeach the President of the United States because of your testimony. And if you pull up CNN today, right now, their banner says, Sondland ties Trump to withholding aid. Is that your testimony today, Ambassador Sondland, that you have evidence that Donald Trump tied the investigations to the aid? Because I don't think you're saying that.
I've said repeatedly, Congressman, I was presuming. I also said that President Trump.
So no one told you, not just the president. Giuliani didn't tell you, Mulvaney didn't tell you, nobody, Pompeo didn't tell you, nobody else on this planet told you that Donald Trump was tying aid to these investigations. Is that correct?
I think I already testified.
No, answer the question. Is it correct? No one on this planet told you that Donald Trump was tying this aid to the investigations? Because if your answer is yes, then the chairman's wrong and the headline on CNN is wrong. No one on this planet told you that President Trump was tying aid to investigations. Yes or no?
Yes.
So, you really have no testimony today that ties President Trump to a scheme to withhold aid from Ukraine in exchange for these investigations.
Other than my own presumption.
Which is nothing.
Okay, as I said earlier, when he said he was going to change his testimony, I'm like, wow, this could be the nail in the coffin. And, you know, and when I saw his testimony, and I kind of had to like search for these clips, you know, and it took a very long time. But it tripped me out because what Turner, and he asked it 3 times because he wanted to make sure that he basically just, you know, sealed it, you know, put a nice bow on it. And, you know, he starts off by saying, did Trump tell you that it was tied, that the money was tied to the investigation? And he says, no. So then Turner goes deeper, right? And he said, did Giuliani tell you? Did Mulvaney tell you? And then, you know, and he says, no. And he says, I already said it was speculation. And he goes again a 3rd time. So nobody in this world, okay, so, and the reason he's saying that is because he wants to make sure that he can't always circle back and then tie it to somebody else. So nobody in this world told you that. And he said, yes, basically agreeing with him. And he said, you know, so, you know, you had no reason to believe that. And he goes, as I testified before, I just assumed. That should be over. That should be over. That's so crazy because they keep bringing up his testimony. Because in the beginning of his testimony, he says that everybody was in on it, right? And basically he said it was Trump, Pence, you know, Mulvaney, you know, Giuliani, and I think he also mentioned Barr. I'm not really quite sure. But so he's saying they were all in on it, you know, and it was a quid pro quo. That's what he said. He straight up said it. And I was like, whoa, damn. But he basically also said that in his last testimony, okay, that basically he said that, you know, he wasn't aware that he was doing a quid pro quo or an accessory to it. He was saying, I didn't know. And then basically he went back around, but now after seeing it, he says that was a quid pro quo. And then when you have Turner question him, he says, oh, well, I assumed. So basically you got the transcript where Trump does not say what he's going to give Zelensky for the favor of looking into Burisma. Okay, so that's number 1. Okay, now number 2, none of the witnesses can tie the money to the investigation, right? Nobody can tie it. Okay, they said they weren't aware. They all said that, right? And now you got Sondland saying, well, I speculated. So what I believe that all this damning evidence going around everything is kind of all circles back to Sondland and kind of like Vindman, you know, as well. Because Vindman kind of like, I'm not saying he leaked the information like to the press or anything. What I'm saying is that he's the one that leaked it around who the whistleblower is. And the whistleblower is a guy that kind of like he turned in the report. Okay, and kind of made all this thing off secondhand knowledge, right? So that's another thing, secondhand knowledge. Okay, so now, one of the things we should cover here, okay, that I've always felt this, okay? Okay, so now if you're accusing President Trump of withholding aid to Ukraine based on an investigation, and you can't have a foreign country help you get dirt on a presidential candidate, right? Okay, so first off, Biden is not the primary. He's a candidate to the primary right now. He's not the primary yet. Is it possible? Sure, I think he's actually ahead. He might be the front runner. Okay, but he's not the primary yet for Democrats. One. Number two, again, he says the reason why this becomes questionable for Biden is because he got that investigator fired by withholding aid as well. Okay, now, and the reason why he gets fired, okay, again, this is the speculation, is that he was trying to protect his son, basically stopping an investigation that was happening to Burisma, the company his son worked for. Okay, the Obama administration had already expressed concern about that. But, of course, they didn't do nothing. Oh, excuse me. So, and the other thing is that just because somebody is running for president, okay, doesn't exempt them from being investigated. Because that is a big concern. Look, man, if you are withholding aid to a country to stop an investigation because your son can possibly be implicated in it, dude, that is criminal, man. And that's the same thing you're accusing Trump. But because Biden is a Democrat, oh, he's trying to get dirt on his opponents. No, it doesn't mean that he's exempt from investigation. That's one. Okay, that's for me, that's it. Now, if it was strictly just on getting dirt on Biden, and he said, look, man, I got this political rival, and I need to get him off my back. If that's what he said on the call, yeah, you know what? I'd be sold on it, but I'm not. And the issue here is that I'm not saying that the call is not concerning, and I'm not saying that they haven't had all the other witnesses. They haven't had Barr there. They haven't had Mulvaney. And I'm forgetting who else they haven't had. Or Trump. And there's a few documents that they haven't submitted yet. And they're saying that Trump is stonewalling them by taking it to the courts. And he's losing, but then submitting them to a higher court. But that's within his right. Okay, so with that being said, you haven't got the full evidence. And right now, with what the Democrats have, it's really nothing. It's all speculative. This is just, they're just assuming it's like saying, hey, we're assuming that's what he did. But here is a clip of Adam Schiff saying that the facts are uncontested. So let's go with clip number 16.
The facts are really not contested. It's really not contested what the president did. Mm-hmm. What is open to question is whether members of Congress are going to do their duty, and whether there will be anyone like Howard Baker, anyone on the Republican side that is willing to put their country, their Constitution above the party or even the person of this president, because I don't think he really represents at least what the Republican Party used to stand for.
All right, so that is a lie. That is a lie. Because they have no facts. They have no facts, okay? Everything that they have claimed that Trump has done has not been proven. I'm not saying, again, that he didn't do that, okay? But what I am saying is that according to what they have, based on the testimonies that they presented, none of them can provide any proof that this is why it was made. You also have to establish that Trump actually feared Joe Biden winning. And I don't think he did. I honestly don't. Okay? So that's one thing. Okay? Now, here's something else that he says that kind of tripped me out. Okay? So let's play the remainder part of clip 16.
If the facts aren't contested and your committee is writing up the report and you don't, at least as of now, have any scheduled witnesses or depositions, Do you think President Trump should be impeached?
I want to discuss this with my constituents and my colleagues before I make a final judgment on it.
All right, so here's the thing. If the facts are irrefutable, which is that's what he was saying, they're not refuted, right? Did I say irrefutable? Okay, so if the facts, if he's saying that the facts are not contested, right? And he's so sure that he did this, why does he need to speak to his constituents? Well, I'll tell you why. They're running for re-election. That's why. And so, and this is important to note. Okay, so everybody's going for re-election. I believe it's senators and the and Congress and of course the president in the next year's election. So I think that he wants to speak to his constituents because if his constituents tell him, dude, we're sick of this impeachment stuff, I think it'll paint him in a corner when he runs again. You know, and I think it's going to paint other Democratic congressmen and women in a corner as well. I mean, not necessarily in Democratic areas, you know, like this Democratic districts where like, hey, they're going to vote Democrat all the time. But there were some areas, some districts that Trump had actually won in 2016 that flipped to Democrats. And that means they can easily be flipped back if they feel like their congressman or woman are not that they're not doing their job. You know, that they're stuck on these impeachment hearings. And that's something that Trump is going to push. When he runs again, he's going to push that. Now, another thing to note here. Give me 1 second. Okay, so another thing to note here is the Senate, okay? So now this has already gone through the Judiciary Committee, okay? I'll go into details a little bit more on that another time, on another segment. But they've already written the articles of impeachment, which number 1 is abuse of power, and number 2 is obstruction of Congress, okay? Yeah, I'm sorry. Those are not going to stick. Those are not going to stick because they say that he abuses power when he pressured Ukraine into doing a quid pro quo. Well, they didn't say quid pro quo. They said pressuring them to do an investigation on a political rival. Okay? Now, yes, it's true. He is a political rival, but he's not the primary. And as I said before, just because you're running for president doesn't mean you're exempt from an investigation. Clearly, we saw that with Trump. Okay, so now number 2, okay, you know, they're saying that it's an abuse of power. They pressured Ukraine. Look, Zelensky had already said there was no push, but I think it was, you know, a language barrier there. He meant, you know, there was no pressure. He didn't feel any pressure from Trump on the phone call. And then he said this actually a couple of more times during interviews. He said, I did not feel pressured by Trump at all. So that's what he's saying, okay? Now, you know, so they're saying that. Now they're saying obstruction of Congress, okay? Now this is kind of funny because they're not saying obstruction of justice. They're saying obstruction of Congress. And again, I said earlier when they talked about it, they said, oh, well, he keeps taking it to the courts to kind of push it along, right? That may be true, but it's within his right to do so. And one of the things that was brought up was that Obama had done that during the Fast and Furious stuff that was going on. And he did that. He basically, you know, went through the courts as well. So that is important to note. Okay, so can he get impeached? I believe so, yes. Now, let me go back to my notes here. Sorry about that. These were off in the beginning. So, okay, so in order for them to have, after the Judiciary Committee brings up the articles of impeachment, which we've already seen the 2 that they're doing, okay, they're going to have a vote, okay? Now, that means all 435 members of Congress will vote whether to impeach or not. Okay, now in order for this to move forward, meaning to move forward with impeachment, you have to have more than 50% of the votes, okay? Meaning that 218 and above, anything less than that, it's dead in the water, okay? That means it gets cleared and it doesn't move forward, okay? Now, one thing to note, even if the vote for impeachment goes through, it doesn't mean that the president gets removed, okay? I'm going to explain to that in a second. And the reason why I believe that they'll actually get the votes for impeachment is because the Democrats have the majority, okay? So now you currently have, in the House, you have 234 Democrats and you have 197 Republicans, okay? Now, as I told you before, they got to have 218 plus, okay? And I doubt they're going to have, more of the Democrats defecting. We saw already two not defecting like, their party, but basically towards this impeachment. We already had, when they had the vote for impeachment, two Democrats has stated that they did not want the impeachment to go through, okay? So I'm expecting to kind of see those again. You also have other people that have been saying things that, like, they're unsure. Now, from what I know, it's two other congressmen. I forgot the congresswoman that said that. I forgot her name. Sorry about that. And then it was Congressman Liu. And so Congressman Liu and Adam Schiff are saying that, they're going to talk to their constituents. I'm going to hold back. A lot of them are saying they're going to hold back. No, I think you guys already made your decisions, and you wouldn't be pushing for a vote to impeachment if you didn't have the vote. So that's what I think. All right, so let's just say, and I'm pretty confident that it's going to go to impeachment, right? That means after that, it goes to the Senate. Now, this is where it gets interesting, okay? Because in the Senate, they can call their own witnesses now. And in the Senate, the Republicans have the majority, okay? Now, so first off, the Senate holds a trial under the supervision of the Supreme Court Chief Justice, okay? Now, in order for impeachment or removal of office to go through, or a conviction, you have to have a 2/3 majority. So that's more than half, just like the House. 2/3 majority, okay? So that means at least 67 senators have to vote for conviction, okay? Anything less than that is dead in the water, okay? Now, currently in the Senate, you have 57 Republicans and 47 Democrats. So there's no way you're going to get those votes. You would have to have a substantial number here of Republicans to basically flip to do this vote. And we're talking about here, 8, 9, 10. So that's 10, 17, 18, 19. So you would have to have 20 Republicans basically flip on the president, which I don't think is going to happen. Okay, now, one of the things that I thought was going to happen, okay, I thought for sure Lindsey Graham, he is the head of the majority, the chairman of the Senate right now. So I thought for sure he was going to call in the Bidens. I thought he was going to call back Vindman. I thought he was going to say the whistleblower needs to do this, and that he would call on Adam Schiff as well. But Lindsey Graham said that he's not going to make it into a circus. And I think that's a big mistake here, okay? Because you would expose that if Schiff did or did not know the whistleblower, okay? And you would expose if Vindman actually knew who the whistleblower was. And you would actually expose the whistleblower and be like, hey, you know what? You can't do this by secondhand, So I think it's a big mistake doing that. And then not only that, getting down to the bottom of the Bidens. If they didn't do anything wrong, then that would be dead in the water. And they would be like, oh, the president made a mistake. And that would probably give him bad press. But if it is damning, and of course this would destroy Joe Biden. But just because it would destroy Joe Biden in the running doesn't mean that the investigation shouldn't happen just because he's running for president, right? So those are my concerns. Anyways, guys, what did you guys think? Okay, if you guys have any contestation to what I've done here, let me know in the comments below. Tell me what you saw that's wrong. Maybe I got a few things wrong. or maybe I removed them out of context. It's possible. These were very, very long hearings. I mean, they were long, and it's very difficult to focus on it and get the information. But I managed to the best of my ability. And also, keep in mind that I am center-leaning right. Okay, so and however, I didn't vote for Trump. And and the reason I didn't vote on that particular one is that I just didn't want my vote to go to either Trump or Hillary Clinton. So that's important to note. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, however, I'm trying to look at this as objective as possible, and I'm honestly not seeing any of the evidence that Adam Schiff is seeing, or that Nadler is seeing, or that Nancy Pelosi, or Maxine Waters, or any of these Democrats, Castro, Liu, who continuously say that the facts are uncontested. I just don't think they got the facts. They're not contested because you have no facts. Okay, that's my opinion. That's basically what I get from this, from everything that I've done. Anyways, let me know what you guys are thoughts. Maybe I missed something. Let me know in the comments below. Other than that, guys, hey. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for sharing. And also, hey, again, if you want to donate, I'll put up the thing on the screen right now. If you want to donate through Zelle, PayPal, or Venmo and help the channel out, like I said, this is a lot of content. This is a lot of work. And, we want to improve things like, the internet. We want to improve, cameras, lighting, and stuff like that. I think it looks okay, but, obviously it could be better. And if you guys can't do that, hey, share. If you guys can't, the best thing would be to share the video so that more people can join this programming. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.